Welcome to Inspired by Success, the podcast where I deep dive into the mindset of successful entrepreneurs, CEOs, and thought leaders. Get ready to be inspired and gain valuable insights to unlock your true potential. Today we have got an incredible guest named Ken Oliver. So Ken has an amazing story to tell. I came across his profile one day on LinkedIn and I was so moved and touched by his story that I had to reach out. He's not just the VP of checker.org, but he's had a very interesting past before that. He was in prison for, was it 23 years? Was that how long it was?
Yeah, close
And
to 24, but 23. Yeah,
yeah, I want to know all about your journey, how it all started, from
sure.
prison to where you are now, because you've had to overcome so many different challenges. And I found that truly inspiring to where you got to where you are. Some people, go through prison life and they come out of it in a good way. And some people just keep on going back in. So, you've done so many different, like amazing things since then. Tell us about your story and how it all began.
Sure. Well, first, Linda, I'd like to say thank you for having me on the show. It's an honor, and I'm humbled to be here to share this story with you and your listeners. Um, you asked me to share a little bit about my journey from prison to becoming a VP at Checker. It's a long journey, a labyrinth of a journey that really started probably with my upbringing. I grew up in South LA, which is what they call out here in America the hood. A lot of poverty, a lot of gang membership, a lot of um, reaching for things that are inaccessible, hustling, drug use, that type of stuff. And at a pretty early age, I found myself out in the streets around 14, 15 years old, and had my first touch points with the incarceration and justice system here in America at that age. And then, in and out during my youth and my formative years, I had some successes as well. And then when I was in my mid to late 20s, I found myself a passenger in a friend of mine's car that happened to be stolen from a car dealership. And his family owned a garage and body shop in uh, LA. And they used to swap out VIN numbers and sell stolen cars to folks that would oftentimes be shipped overseas into other places. That was their business, and they did it for a lot of years. And so I was asked one day to accompany my friend, and I knew what I was doing. I was just doing him a favor to ride from one part of town to the other. Didn't think much of it at the time, and we got pulled over by the police. And when we got pulled over, because I had trouble with the law before, I fell victim to what they called at the time the three strikes law.
Mm.
And just for your listening audience, the three strikes law basically said that if you had a prior conviction, even if you had served your time and successfully gotten off probation or parole, that even if you stole a pack of cigarettes, that you'd be given life in prison. And this law came about because there was a person that was in prison that got out of prison in, I think, 1992 or three, and had taken the life of a little girl. And basically, there was an uproar from society that said this person should have never got out of prison to begin with. So there was a huge right wing push to say anybody who gets out of prison who does anything, we're just going to lock them up and throw away the key forever. Didn't matter what you did. There were people who were serving life in prison for stealing a pair of jeans, stealing a pack of cigarettes, stealing a bicycle. One person was in prison for life for stealing a slice of pizza,
Oh
where
my
he walked up to a
gosh.
table, somebody had a pizza open and took a slice of pizza out of their box and kept walking, and he got arrested for that and got served life in prison and had life in prison for that, sentenced to life in prison. So there I was in my mid to late 20s, and I found myself looking at life in prison. And the judge in my case, in short, said this charge that you have of being a passenger in the stolen vehicle is not worth life in prison. I'll offer you like 14 or 15 years in prison to do it. But if you don't take it right now, I'm bound by the law to give you life. And so at the time, I'm in my mid to late 20s, 14 or 15 years seemed like an eternity to me. I was
Mm.
calculating in my mind, oh my God, I'll be 40 something when I get out, right? That was like, for a person in their 20s, that's like a death wish to be in your 40s. I mean, back then. So I didn't take it. And the judge 5 days later gave me life in prison.
Oh no.
And so I knew, Linda, that my life was worth more than being sentenced to life in prison. And I felt that I was going to resist the notion that I was going to die in prison. And so as soon as I went to prison, I did the only thing I could do to have some semblance of freedom. I just started to read voraciously. So I read books from some of the most famous authors that have ever lived on the planet. Henry David Thoreau. I read Ho Chi Minh. I read, Warren Buffett. I read War and Peace. I read Tolstoy, Crime and Punishment, business books, Jim Collins, you name it. If I could get my hands on it, I read it. And what that kind of allowed me to do is it kind of allowed me to enter into this realm of having lots of conversations with great minds. And so I would think about what they said. I would kind of talk back at them, write notes, vicariously, with these people, these great intellects and people who had written these books. And that really kept my mind free. And just to kind of give you context, that was the only part of myself that I could keep free. Like they had my body captured, they had my movements restricted, but they couldn't control my mind.
Yes.
And so I told myself that what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to read books. And if they ever decide to let me out, I'm going to be able to hit the ground running. So I tried to stay attached to society and the community by reading books about business, about technology, about, you name it, I read it. I used to drive my family crazy because almost every letter I wrote them, I'd send them a list of 50 books that I wanted, right? And they
Oh
were
wow.
like,
And they send you the books. They
yeah,
send you all the books.
they would send me the
Oh.
books, I come from a family of people who were in higher education, so they acknowledged and supported me, um, reading the books, and so that was a good thing. Um, so what happened after that? I was reading a book about the Black Panther Party, and it was one of maybe 100 books I had in my cell at the time. And a correctional officer came in and saw the books that I had, and they started an investigation on me because they basically said that because I was reading those types of books, I represented a threat to the prison system. Reading
Wow.
books, about Mao Zedong and the Black Panther Party, political books. I would read all different types of books. And so they put me in solitary confinement indefinitely.
Wow. They thought you were
Indefinitely,
going to start something
right?
inside. Oh my goodness.
Well, what I found over time is that all across this world, people are scared of knowledge. And when you look at places, governments and oppressors typically try to keep the oppressed uneducated.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you educate yourself, you really might wake up one day and realize that you're not supposed to be oppressed. And
Yes.
that's how revolutions start in this world, is when people realize that they're not supposed to be oppressed or taken advantage of in the way, that they have been. And so I think that was their fear, is that I was becoming dangerous mentally, that I could convince men to move right or move left based on the knowledge base that I had acquired. And so I filed a lawsuit against the state corrections department, for doing that, because I thought to myself, well, here we live in a place called America, and as bad as it is, we do have a constitution.
Exactly.
And the Constitution, under the freedom of speech clause of the First Amendment, says that you can read anything, that America is not allowed to be the thought police, that you can't.
Wait. When you were in solitary confinement, does that mean no reading as well? You weren't
No,
allowed
no.
to read?
You can still read books. I read more books in solitary than I read even when I was in the general population. So,
Okay.
but what I changed what I was reading. I became really engrossed with reading the law and understanding the Constitution, because I knew that when I read, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, one of the things he talks about in there is that you have to master your enemy. And what I needed to do, if I was going to fight legally the system, I needed to master the system. I needed to understand how they think. I needed to understand how they were able to do what they had done over a century period of time. And so I literally went back in history and started with the first constitutional case that was ever published by the United States Supreme Court. And I started to read about due process of law. I started to read about cruel and unusual punishment and the Eighth Amendment. I started to read about the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, and the freedom to read, and just poured for years over cases and cases. I wanted to read how the attorneys were arguing the cases. I wanted to see and master how they were structuring their argument. I wanted to understand from a landscape perspective what worked and what didn't and why not, right? Because I knew that by laying all the puzzle pieces, so to speak, out on the table and touching them and feeling them and understanding them is the only way I could put together the puzzle pieces to save my own life. Because at that time, they said I would never get out of solitary confinement. So I was literally in a cell 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, about 6.5 days a week. And I had a 50-year to life sentence. So I was, according to them, I was going to die there.
Wow.
And so fast forward to 2014, the people in solitary confinement staged the largest hunger strikes in American history that were staged indoor. 30,000 of us in the prison system in California staged massive hunger strikes that got the attention of the United Nations and several lawyers from across the country about the practice of the California prison system of placing people in solitary confinement indefinitely because they accuse them of being radicals or intellects or gang members without having done anything. You wouldn't have had to commit an act. They would just do it based on status. So for what that means is that if you and I were having this conversation today, prison officials could say, well, Linda's having a conversation with Ken. And since Ken is a bad actor, Linda's now a bad actor. You and I could have been talking about baseball, but that didn't matter. Just the fact that you talked to me and were talking to me showed that you associated with me, and they could put you in solitary confinement indefinitely. And that's what they did to me. And so when I executed the lawsuit, Stanford University and a law firm by the name of Mayer Brown helped me and came to help defend me against the system. And we won in 2018. And in 2019, as a result of that lawsuit and my success filing the lawsuit, they let me out of prison. They paid me a little bit of money too, but they let me out of prison, which was more important.
Yeah.
So there I was after serving close to 24 years in prison, almost 9 of those in solitary confinement. And
9, did
I
you
walked
say?
out of prison.
9
Almost
years
9 in solitary confinement. Yeah, almost 9,
Wow.
about 8 years and 8 months. So in 2019, I walked out of prison on June the 3rd. And one of the conditions of my release was that I had to come to San Francisco, California. I'm from LA. So I had no friends in San Francisco. I didn't know anything about the San Francisco Bay Area. And I was put in this system called the reentry system, where you go live in these houses that are like temporary housing as you acclimate and reintegrate back into society. And they put me in a house where there was 5 bedrooms and 17 men living crammed up in this small space. And they sent me to a bedroom with 4 other men on bunk beds in this small bedroom. And I'm like, wow, this mirrors prison. And then they said, well, you can't use hand sanitizer in this place because you might drink it. I said, I might drink it. I've never heard of that before. And they were like, yeah, people get drunk off of hand sanitizer. And then they said I couldn't go outside after 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I started to think, when they kept imposing these rules, this is like prison.
Yeah, but on the outside.
So yeah, so I knew that there was something wrong with what we call here in America the reentry system. And I started to go about and think about what I could do to change it, because the experience for me took away my dignity, or it tried to take away my dignity. It took away my ability to concentrate on what I was trying to do, which was reintegrate into society back in a successful way. And so I started to think about how I could design what I called at the time the Stanford of reentry programs. I wanted to design a program where men and women can come home. They could be housed in a dormitory environment with their own room, their own bathroom, and they could concentrate on learning skills, so that way they could get back into the workforce. And I had an infatuation with tech because I read so much about tech when I was in prison. So I thought, why aren't there opportunities for justice impacted men and women to get into the tech space? We know that we live in a technology-based economy. We know that technology is what is driving the future in the world. And we should be training men and women, right, who are just as impacted for more than just their labor. We should be training them for entrepreneurship, technology, the knowledge-based economy, et cetera. And so um, I started to design that program. And in 2020, a friend of mine got out of prison and started a nonprofit organization and asked me to come be the executive director and build out this vision that I had about building what I called a college campus for justice impacted people when they get out of prison. And so we did. We had a small team, and we did. And then I leveraged some of my policy experience to speak to the California legislature and the governor. And in 2021, they gave me almost $30 million to build out this campus and this tech training program for justice impacted men and women. It was the first ever in its kind. And when they awarded us the money in the budget, the California budget, I was out of prison 2 years. So I often tell the story about, I remember on a Friday, I was in my car driving. I didn't really think we would get the money, but it was an idea. And the budget chairperson called me about 4 in the afternoon and said, "Ken, we just came out of session of the legislature, and they're going to give you every dime you asked for." I said, 28.5 million? She said, "Yeah, they're going to give it to you because they believe in you and they believe in the vision." So I was, tears came to my eyes, and it was like a miracle.
Wow.
And then shortly thereafter, this tech company in San Francisco called Checker, which is a background check company. They're a $5 billion company that sells background checks. But they also do something very amazing. They hire justice impacted men and women to work at their tech company. They believe in hiring people out of prison to be engineers, to work in HR, to work in sales, to work in all different legal. They have people working in legal. And they wanted to evangelize to companies all across America why they should invest in what we call fair chance hiring. And fair chance hiring means that a company is willing to give the best candidate the opportunity for the job despite the record. So we often say we don't ask companies to lower the bar to employment. We ask them to lower the barrier to employment. And so I get the privilege to go around now and talk to corporations all across America, some of the biggest companies in the world, about how to change their hiring practices and hire justice impacted people, because it's good for the economy. It's good for businesses, it's good for communities, it's good for people, et cetera. So Checker wanted to do this. So they wanted to form a corporate foundation. They wanted to be a leader in the fair chance movement. And they asked me would I come over. I wasn't interested really at first because I just got the big award of the money from the state government. But as we talked about it and had a lot of conversations, we talked about the impact I could have on the corporate side of talking to corporations versus just training justice impacted men and women. And so in 2021, they asked me would I be interested in becoming the VP of Checker.org, which is corporate social responsibility, and build this out nationally, become a spokesperson for this across the country. And that's what I've done. So I built a team here at Checker, and we just launched an apprenticeship program where we took 9 men and women who got out of prison and we gave them jobs for a year. We gave them all salaries of $65,000 a year. We gave them full benefits, and now they'll be trained for a year in different departments within Checker. And after they graduate the program after a year, we look forward to hiring them and bringing on the team. So that's kind of a short but long way of talking about this is what's happened to me the last 4 years since I got out of prison on June 3rd, 2019.
It's incredible. It's so inspiring. Can we go back into the days in prison? Like, I didn't want to interrupt, but it was just when you
Sure.
mentioned when they solitary confinement. Does that mean no? Like, walk me through that. Is that kind of like, how does that work? Is that locked up in a cell with an hour a day? Is that what it's like?
Well, it's not an hour. The popular myth is it's an hour a day. You spend 23 hours a day, but it's really 24 hours a day. And then once or twice a week, if you're lucky, they let you out into a dog kennel size cage for about 2 hours. And so the cage is like an 8 by 10 fully enclosed cage all the way around, including the top. And it's made of fence, just like a dog kennel. And you can't take 3 steps in any direction, right, left, up, or down. And you're able to go out there and like pace back and forth for 2 hours. And then that's it. They come get you and you got to lock back up. So oftentimes you don't even go out there because of the weather. So what they don't tell you is like when it's raining or when it's cold or whatever, the only thing you're allowed to wear in solitary is a pair of boxers and a t-shirt. So no one goes outside when it's raining because you don't want to get rained on. You got to stay out there for 2 hours in the rain, or when it's ice cold, which it is all during the winter. Um, so yeah, it's basically being locked up in a cell 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Even when you come out to shower, you got to go to shower in shackles, and they escort you. And then when they lock you in the shower, then they take it off and you get 5 minutes and they come shackle you back and escort you back. So that's kind of the way it works in solitary confinement.
That could easily like break a person, I think, and make someone go mental. Like I'm just guessing like the challenges like being in solitary confinement. Do you have any like any specific moments that taught you like how to be resilient, how to overcome that challenge, or did you have anything that made you held on to hope as well during those tough
Sure.
times?
I think that's a really great question, Linda. It's a great question because, how do you define or describe the substance that makes up resilience in a human being, right? You mentioned earlier that it sounded like this could break a lot of people, and it did break a lot of people. It broke a lot of grown men who lost their sanity and other kind of things from the isolation and not having anyone to talk to and living in solitary confinement for a lot longer than I was there. There were people there that were there for decades, 10, 20,
Wow.
30 years. There was one person that was there for 40 years in solitary confinement, which is why the United Nations has come out with a statement and said that any time you put someone in solitary confinement for more than 30 days, it's considered to be international cruel and unusual punishment. Like they said that this is basically an illegal practice to do to human
Mm,
beings,
it's inhumane.
and so inhumane. So I don't have the exact words to say what caused me to do it. What I do know is that I valued my own self worth, and it goes back to what I said earlier about when the judge gave me 50 years to life in prison, and in essence told me I was going to die in prison. I refused to believe that. And so when I was in solitary for reading a book, I refused to accept that. And what I told myself is that I'm going to fight to free myself from this because it's wrong, or I'm going to die trying.
Yeah.
And so I was committed to proving and righting a wrong, not to just happen to me. Yes, it happened to me, but also a wrong principally and morally, um, putting somebody in that situation for reading a book and then making the assumption that because they read a book, somehow they were going to morph into the words that they were reading. Right? If that was the case, there would be no entertainment industry because that means every time somebody watched a movie, they would like personalize it
Be
and
the
then go
same.
out and try to be a transformer or try to be the bad guy, the Joker in the Batman movie or whatever. Right? So it's
Yeah.
kind of a ridiculous notion, but prison officials carried on that way on a regular basis. So for me, it was just like I remember saying to myself that this is what they did to my ancestors. There are laws that you can look up right now where it was forbidden for slaves that were brought here from Africa to read. They would lynch and mutilate black slaves that were brought over here by Europeans for reading. And in the South, there's laws on the books that said it's illegal for a slave to read. And I knew the reason why they did that. They did that because they wanted people to stay slaves.
Yeah.
And if you read books and became educated, you wouldn't believe that you were a slave anymore. You'd actually believe that you're a human being and you have dignity. And so for me, because I knew that history, I said, what they're trying to do to me is they're trying to break me as a black man from reading my own history by putting me in a prison underneath the prison because I was reading. And so that made me want to read more. It didn't make me want to like back up. It made me want to
Mm,
order 100 more books.
Yeah.
Now you've got a fight on your hands because I see what's bothering you. What's bothering you is that I'm going to wake up, right, intellectually, and realize who I am just as a human being. And so that's what gave me hope every day. It was hard. It wasn't easy. Trust me. There was many days where you want to give up, but then you like you don't want to die in the face of wrong. At least I didn't. And so I said I'm gonna fight until I don't have any fight in me to prove this right. And ultimately I was successful.
It's incredible. Do they still have that like three strikes law? Do they still have that in
No,
America?
most of the three strikes law has been repealed. They've taken it off the books. Um,
My
they
goodness.
have a small version of it, um, but there's people fighting every day to even get the small version removed because it was so draconian. It was so horrific of a law that you literally would spend millions of dollars to lock a person up for a $10 crime. You spend millions of dollars to lock them up for life in prison for something that had so little value as far as property that it's just inhumane.
Yeah, I would
That's
hate
not
to
to
live that.
justify it. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
any of the things that people do are right. So I'm not saying that shouldn't have a cost or a punishment or a consequence. It should. What I'm suggesting is that if somebody steals a loaf of bread, right? There's a book about this called Los Miserables, right? Um, somebody steals a loaf of bread, you don't give them life in prison.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm saying. It didn't the crime didn't match the punishment that was given.
Exactly. Was there anyone in prison that inspired you, and or helped with your personal development, or was that fully just reading all those books and using those authors as
Yeah,
your
I think
motivation?
I think the authors that I read motivated me because I read a lot of stories and a lot of books about resilience. I read, books like Civil Disobedience, The People's History by Howard Zinn, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. I read about people who thought differently outside of the box, and that always inspired me to figure out how I could think differently, how I could incorporate some of the values and resiliency that these folks had. And so I can't point to one individual that I met that inspired me one way or the other, but the one book that they ended up putting me in solitary for was written by a gentleman by the name of George Jackson. And George Jackson was a person from LA in California. And at 19, he got locked up for a gas station robbery, a $50 gas station robbery, and was given life in prison. And while he was doing life in prison, he did solitary confinement. This is in the 60s. He was sentenced to solitary confinement. And while he was in solitary confinement, he became a genius. He read a lot of um, revolutionary material because that was what was going on in the 60s. He read a lot of Mao Zedong, Ho Chi Minh. He read a lot of books by a whole bunch of people across the world, Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, all from international revolutionary movements. And he became this revolutionary theorist. And his story kind of mirrored what happened with Malcolm X when Malcolm X went to prison and read all those books and started reading words and became, eloquent. So George Jackson was not only gifted intellectually, he was also gifted physically, meaning that he was a fighter. Like he would fight the police. He was like a real revolutionary guy, and he scared the prison officials to death. Ultimately, they plotted to kill him, and they did. They shot him in the head in San Quentin prison in 1971. Um, and
Wow.
people from all over the world, Bob Dylan wrote a song about him. It's called Soledad Brothers. He was the girlfriend. He was the boyfriend of Angela Davis, the famous women's rights activist from California, who was a former professor at UCLA. So this big body of people in the '60s and early '70s during the Black Power movement had come to George Jackson's aid. And so reading him and about his story when he was in his 20s, because I was in my 20s, and understanding how much fight he had in him not to accept what prison officials or what society had deemed him to be, like a throwaway person, a faceless, nameless person whose life wasn't worth anything. He fought that. And ultimately, he sacrificed his life for those beliefs. Um, wrote a couple books that are famous across the world, Soledad Brother and Blood in My Eye. And that person probably had the single biggest impact. Him and Malcolm X probably had the single biggest impact on the way that I thought about myself. Um, yeah, so he was my inspiration, my influence on why I should keep going forward, why I should be doing the things that I do. But I will say that he wasn't the only influence, because if he was the only influence, I wouldn't be at a tech company right now doing what I'm doing. I also love business. I love, self help and all personal development. Like I love all of those things too. So I am actually a human that can think about more than one thing. Contrary to what the prison officials thought when they put me in solitary.
Amazing. And with like all these things that you learned, how do you inspire and motivate your team as a leader to overcome their obstacles and also achieve their goals? If you've set such
Sure.
crazy high standards as well, like it's not everybody can do what you've done. So that's why I was truly inspired. Not many people have that motivation and drive, So
Well,
how
well,
did
I,
you do that?
I, I actually think, Linda, that everyone can do it, though. I actually teach people that they can do it. And I talk about us removing the lids of our own lowered expectations that we have of self. Society, from the time we're able to walk, tells us some form of limiting belief about ourselves and about what's possible, about who we are, who we should be. It starts with our parents, and they don't do it intentionally to be wrong, but they kind of tell you what we should be, right? And they tell you how we should act and how far we can go and how far we won't go. And then the school system kind of reinforces that. They tell us to do this or they tell us to do that. And then you have other people that tell you what's possible. And so what I tell my team is like, we don't have any kind of roof on our possibilities. Like, first of all, believe in the power of possibility. Everything is possible. Every time you think of something, dream about the most extreme, biggest, wildest thing that you can think of. And let's figure out how to backwards map that and make that happen. Right. So I teach that in my culture or with my team here at Checker every single day. Don't accept what you've been told. Let's figure a way to fight out of that if it's possible. If it's not, that's okay too. We'll figure out how to navigate that. But I encourage them to think beyond the lanes of what have been carved out for us. Because when you think about status quo, then the people who design the status quo, they stay in power. That's true for entrepreneurship. Tech is a disruptor, right? Entrepreneurs are disruptors. Entrepreneurs are the people that think outside the box and say, what is being done now that can be done different? And they go out and build and design things and try things outside of what was conventional. If people didn't think that way, we wouldn't be flying in airplanes right now. The Wright brothers refused. As crazy as it sounded back then, we're going to fly through the air. Imagine society then. You guys are crazy. You're nuts. But yet there they were out there in the field, right? Trying to run an airplane and trying to get something to fly. Same thing with the car, Henry Ford and the car. Like, we're going to get something to work on with a motor and wheels, and we're going to be able to drive. I mean, back then it was horse and buggy, right?
Yes.
People were walking hundreds and thousands of miles. It would take them years and years to walk across the country, right? But here you had somebody who was innovative and thought outside the box and said, what is possible? Right? And they pushed the envelope, right? And so I love that type of thinking. I love to be able to think about what's possible. It doesn't mean everything is going to be possible, but if you continually think like that and you approach problems like that, you'll challenge yourself to come up with new solutions and new possibilities. And I encourage my team to believe in those possibilities. And, I teach them and lead, and they teach me too. I encourage them as leaders in the company to lead by example, right? Don't accept self-limiting beliefs, and always be resilient in the face of failure. And every time they feel like they want to give up or they can't or whatever, I said, listen, I hear you and I respect it. I did almost 9 years in solitary confinement, and they told me I would die there, but I'm still here today. I'm still successful. I'm still pushing the envelope, still making things happen. So if you don't believe anything else, believe that we are a testament to ultimate and radical resilience. And so let's incorporate that in our daily living. Let's incorporate that in the way that we work and the way that we support people. Because at the end of the day, I'm a servant leader. I serve people. and our team serves people. We're responsible for serving people. If we give up on the people that are in prison, if we give up on changing the culture in corporate America, who's going to do it? Who's going to do it? Right? There's people in prison right now waiting for someone like me to go convince Google or some other company to hire justice impacted people. So that way they have an opportunity just to go to work, just to take care of their kids, just so they can take their wife or their husband out to dinner for a meal. Things that we take for granted every day. Like that's all people want. People just want a shot to live a normal life and not live in poverty. That's all.
Fascinating. Have you mentioned like Google? Have you had any tech companies that have like famous big tech companies that have hired
Sure.
any of your
A
candidates?
lot of, yeah, a lot of companies in America are hiring justice impacted people. JP Morgan Chase, Chase Bank, they hired 4,300 people last year. 10% of their new hires are people that have records, right? Hard to imagine, right?
Wow.
Financial institution, one of the biggest in the world, hiring people out of prison, right? They do. The reason why companies are doing it, there's a lot of big companies do it. Zoom does it, PayPal does it. Companies that you wouldn't suspect are hiring justice impacted people. The reason why they're doing it is because here's what people miss. We're so busy looking at bad versus good. We're so busy at judging people who make decisions, right, that have those kind of consequences. Every single person in the world has made mistakes. I don't know a single person in the world that hasn't made a mistake or done something that they regretted.
Hmm.
We don't want to be defined by the worst mistake we ever made. We want to be able to fail, pick up the pieces, pay whatever the consequence is, and keep moving and hopefully learn from that experience. Whether it's a lie or whether it's something that did harm, it all deserves the same ability to rebuild and regroup, right? And so it's a win-win for businesses when they hire people that are just as impacted because it's like hiring somebody that's never had a friend and now you embrace them. At Checker, when we hire people that are just as impacted, they're so happy, like they feel out of place, they feel so loved. They're like, oh my God, I'm actually working inside of a tech company. They
Wow.
work harder. They're
Yes.
promoted faster and more often. They're more loyal. There's less attrition. You can't get rid of us. We're like puppy dogs. Like we keep coming back to the door. Like we'll do whatever it takes because we're so glad that somebody gave us a shot to prove our own humanity. That we're willing to
Exactly.
work, we're willing to do overtime, we're willing to do it all to show you that we have value. And so people, companies in America are seeing that, but there's still a lot of work to be done. I mean, it's not, so widespread that I can say I shouldn't have a job. But changing the narrative of what a justice impacted person looks like or sounds like or is capable of is part of why I enjoy doing what I do every day.
It's amazing. It's so good. How do you continue to challenge yourself and set new goals even after achieving all this success that you've had now? So you've done
Well,
so much in your life. So how do you keep continuing to challenge
yeah.
yourself?
Well, believe it or not, I've only been home 4 years, and I've had 3 or 4 jobs, and each one has been more challenging and higher than the previous one. But I'm an entrepreneur at heart, so there's still a lot of world that I want to conquer. Still a lot of things I want to do. And ultimately, what I want to do is I want to be able to serve people, but I also want to be able to make enough money where I could self-determine the rest of my life. Because what I would love to be able to do for the rest of my life is I love to be able to travel. I love to be able to
Mm.
go across the world and meet different cultures and people and experience stories and see other conditions of living, other languages, other food. Because at the end of the day, it's not about consumerism. It's not about material culture. It's about learning about humanity and the universe and all the things that brought us here to begin with, right? And having an understanding of those things. And I think it's hard to do when you're caught up in the rat race all the time for your life. So many people were taught, like, let's go to work at 21. As soon as you graduate college, you go to work, you work for 50 years, you retire, you get a pension. And then before you know it, you realize you didn't do anything that you wanted to do in life. You didn't experience anything. You were actually a slave to the wage
Exactly.
for your entire life. The only people that were benefiting from that and traveling the world and seeing all the things are the people that you work for, the owners of the company. This is part of the
Yeah.
great, like, this is a part of the great trick they play on everybody. Just get a 4 bedroom house, have 2 kids, get a picket fence and a dog and a Tesla, and you got the American dream. They tell us that story because the people that are writing that story are the people that own the companies. They own the factories. They own the businesses that are making millions and billions from us, and they're living the life that they want to live without restraint financially. And then we are getting on the freeway, breathing smog, busting our ass every day, just to make ends meet. And it's a cycle because you can never get out of that cycle. You just paying bills, right? Paying to
Mm.
exist. And that's kind of what it is. I don't want to be in that situation. I don't want to die in that situation if I can help it. I want to be able to travel and meet people like you all over the world and listen to stories and tell stories and have a rich and fulfilling life when it's all over.
That's beautiful. Do you get to travel with your role now and just inspire and tell your story? Because I think your story is incredible. I'm sure that Checker would get you to travel around the world and share it and speak to the world about it. Do you get to
Sure.
do
Well,
that?
I do a lot of traveling. I'm asked to tell my story a lot. And to be honest with you, I don't enjoy telling my story because it's not about me at the end of the day. What I tell people who ask me to do it, it's great that my story can be used as a vehicle, but it's not about Ken Oliver. It's about the 2 million men and women right now who don't have a voice. It's about the 2 million men and women right now who don't have a face or a name. They're a number. And so I'm out here representing them. That's who I speak for. That's who I'm trying to change the trajectory for. Right. And so I don't want people to get fixated on me because people like to say, oh, you're an anomaly. No, I'm not anything. I'm not. What I am is I am the face of what is possible when you invest in people over punishment and retribution and revenge thinking. That's what I am. I'm the face of that. And I'm here to like break all the myths that you had about what it's like to be a black man in America who just came out of prison. I'm here to shatter anything that you ever thought because if I get in a room with you, guaranteed I'm gonna think step for step with you. I'm gonna be able to converse with you step for step, and I'm gonna be able to problem solve step for step with you. And by the time you're done dealing with me, everything that you ever thought about what I was supposed to be, you're gonna change your mind about it. And I want that to be the case for every man and woman that's in prison right now and know that they're human beings. They deserve a shot. We need to love them. We need to lift them. We need to give them opportunity. And if we do that, great things are going to happen for them and for the community.
Wow, that is truly inspiring. Do you have any regrets in life? Like, I mean, everything is life learning lessons, but what are the biggest regrets that you've had in life?
Sure. It's a tricky question because certainly you have things that you would have done differently that you regret, painful things, right? I left three small children behind when I went to prison. I had two daughters and a son, and they grew up without parents. So, I mean, grew up without a father. They had their mother. That's very painful to me because I can see in them, in their life, how my absence affected them. When I got out of prison, they were all grown. Um, so that's very regretful for me how my decision making impacted their life. That's that's something that I can't read my way out of, or I can't success my way out of. That's real life interaction with, my children. So that's regretful. Harming my family in the way by through disappointment and absence. The choices that I made that landed me in prison cost them. I used to call my sister from prison when I wasn't in solitary confinement. I would complain about doing so much time in prison. And she used to tell me, rightfully so, she said, well, every time you think about how painful it is in prison, I want you to think about that you're not the only person in prison. Your sisters and your family are in prison with you, right? Because we're doing time with you. We don't have you here. You're not here for Christmas. You're not here for Thanksgiving. You're not here for birthdays and marriages and my nieces and nephews being born and everything. So she would remind me, like, basically quit whining because we're doing it too, right?
Yeah.
Just, you know, you don't have room to complain. So it's true. So those things I definitely regret about how what I went through impacted others. For me, I've come to the realization that my life is a vehicle for something higher. You know, I used to think in prison, like I used to pray and I used to look up to the sky and I'd say, why am I doing all this time for something so trivial? And is this all my life is worth? And The only way that I was able to get through those days is I had to turn it over in faith to something higher than me, right? And I used to tell myself that, you know what, as bad as I, as an individual, as a common man, wants to be out of prison, right? I have to accept the fate that it's not my time to be out of prison, that there's a higher calling saying that I need to be here. And when that time comes for me to get out of prison, those gates are going to open. And when those gates open, something great is going to happen for me. I used to tell myself that regularly. That's how I kept myself sane when I was in solitary confinement, because it was painful. In solitary, I couldn't get on the phone, couldn't talk to my kids for almost 9 years, couldn't talk to my
Wow.
family, couldn't have visits, physical contact visits.
Oh, wow.
So um, it's amazing, because when I first got out of prison, I just want to tell this brief story because it's just bizarre. So I walked into an office. I was out of prison maybe 2 days, and I'm going to get social services at the office, and they have me in this room, and there's like 10 workers, social workers there that are like processing cases and all that. And I was telling my story a little bit to my caseworker, that I just done life in prison, and telling a little bit about it. And one of the caseworkers walked over to our cubicle and said, "Can I ask you your name?" She said, "I've been listening over, I've overheard you." And I said, "Yeah, my name's Ken." And she put out a piece of paper and she said, "Can you sign this for me?" And I said, "For what?" She said, "I want your autograph because you're going to be famous." I said,
Wow.
"Cut it out." I
Wow.
said, "No." I said, "No way." Right. I said, "Absolutely not." I mean, I thought she was kidding, but she wasn't kidding. Like, she literally like forced me to sign the piece of paper. She said, "I'm going to give this to my daughters. You're going to be famous. I'm going to tell them I met a famous man today." Right. And then when she did that, two other women came over and asked my autograph too. And I was out of prison 2 days. It's 2019, June 5th. And then slowly but surely, all the tech magazines that I used to read in prison, because I wanted to get into tech, all of these things started to happen for me. Not because I'm any different than anybody else. I'm not. Trust me, I'm not. But I started to recognize that I was in the hands of providence, that there was a hand kind of guiding what was happening to me. Right. One other example, my lawyer, from Mayor Brown, when they when we executed the lawsuit and it was solitary, he said, "Ken, I could have got you a lot more money. I could have got you some millions of dollars for what they did to you." He said, "But if I would have done that, you would have had to stay in prison a few more years while we litigated the case." He said, "Your due will come in other forms." That's what he told me. I was still in prison when he told me that. From the moment that I've gotten out of prison, literally, like, every single thing that's happened to me has constantly been by just the grace of something higher than me, right? Who would ever thought that 2 years out of prison, a guy who just served life in prison could be a VP, which takes people out of Stanford and UC Berkeley 15 years to become. I'm a VP at a tech company in San Francisco, California, going around the world, leading teams, inspiring people, talking about change management in corporate America, doing webinars, podcasts. I was just published in Newsweek a couple of weeks ago. LinkedIn did a feature on me. Like, you can't write a movie about that, right? You can't write that into existence. So you have to turn it over to something higher than yourself and just step into it. Make sure you maintain your integrity and you stay righteous and you live into whatever is being brought to you. And that's how I kind of approach my time that way, and I approach life now. You know, that way. I just know that the Creator is like guiding whatever's happening to me, and I'm just trying to like stay afloat and do the right thing and let it come. And it's been coming.
It's amazing. You've blessed, truly, truly blessed, it seems, but you've worked hard for it
I
as
am
well.
blessed.
So, yes, definitely. You mentioned your aspirations for the future. What do you hope to accomplish in the next coming years?
My hope is to create pathways and mechanisms for corporate America and society to remove the stigma that we as a society attach to someone who has broken the law. We live in a society that creates a justice system. We spent almost $1 trillion a year in the justice system with police and DAs and courts and prisons and jails. And the system that we've designed kind of says, if you break the law, We're going to design consequences for you that are laws, and you have to pay your debt to society. And we hire district attorneys that say they represent the people of the society, and they prosecute the case, and then you go to jail or you get whatever the punishment is. And then after you serve the punishment, it's supposed to be over. Well, that's not really the case anymore. In America, there's 48,000 laws in existence that are called collateral consequences that stop people from getting occupational licensing, stop people from getting employment, stop people from getting housing. So it's really a life sentence that we've created against a person that's broken the law. And that's not fair to people. It's not fair to society, because if you exile people from society, where do you expect them to go? What do you expect them to eat? What do you expect them to sleep? Right? Well, I mean, chances are if a person can't access any of those things, then, the Darwinism, survival of the fittest, people are going to go find and make ways to make it happen. Or the other consequences, like substance abuse and medicating away because you're so depressed and you can't function, that you'd rather be on heroin, or you'd rather be on, one of these other drugs, fentanyl, to escape. And then you get in the cycle of like alcoholism or substance abuse is a pain mechanism. It's not because people are bad. People don't want to be like strung out on drugs, but shit, it feels better than what they're facing in society. And so what I would love to do is be responsible for, or play a key role in changing the mindset of the way we approach criminal justice reform once people get out of prison, and provide safe spaces for societies, provide safe spaces for men and for women to just rebuild their lives in a peaceful way and be able to like grow from their mistake. I mean, I live in Silicon Valley, right? And in Silicon Valley, we teach companies teach their leaders to fail and fail fast many times in order to get to the successful piece, right? They teach that.
Yeah.
But yet when it comes to a human being, if I fall down and make a mistake, if I fall down and make a poor choice that ends poorly or badly, right? We don't give that same type of grace. We don't encourage to fail many times so you could be the next Mark Zuckerberg. We say if you fail 1, 2, or 3 times away, we're ready to throw you away as a human being. We label you, we give you a status, we subject you to civil death in so many ways. So I want to be a factor in changing that. And it'll probably be from the business side, the way I do it.
What advice would you give to someone who's gone through these challenges in order to get through what they're going through?
Yeah. Never give up. Don't believe and don't personalize. Don't live into the expectations of others. Be true to yourself. Believe in yourself relentlessly. Know that there's nothing on this planet, nothing that you can't do or you can't accomplish. And if you can live with that mindset, as tough as it is, because it is tough, right? I promise you that the promise behind that possibility, the power behind that possibility, is going to manifest itself for you. But it won't happen if you don't believe it. If you don't think that it's possible, that possibility is not going to realize itself. As soon as you believe in yourself and you believe in what's possible out there, I have faith in every single man and woman on this planet that they can achieve and go anywhere they want to go. And so that's just what I tell them. And I go into prisons and I tell that to men and women. I tell it to corporations when I go meet people, like, let's get out of the box, right? Let's have radical thinking about what's possible and then go out there and get it.
Beautiful, very, very touching and inspiring. I just wanted to ask, where can people follow you? How do they find you?
Sure. Well, I mean, people can find me on LinkedIn. I'm not a big fan of, I don't do a lot of social media. That all that stuff had kind of happened when I was in prison. So I'm an old guy. So I don't do a lot of Instagram, even though I have one. I don't do a lot of Facebook. The best place is you can always email me at ken.oliver, Oliver, at checkr.com. I'm more than willing to talk to anybody in the country, anybody in the world about fair chance hiring, what it means to be justice impacted, how to build programs, how can we can build apprenticeship programs and interns for people, how can we lift up society, how can we show people that they're worthy, how can we give them opportunity, right? just opportunity to earn a living, opportunity to take care of their families, buy a home, all the basic things that every single human on this earth should have the opportunity to do.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. And it was lovely to speak to you. And I wish you all the best and all the success in the world, because it truly, this was one of the most inspiring podcasts I've ever had. So thank you so much for your time for that.
I appreciate you, Linda. Take care.